The black limousine rolled slowly along the gravel path leading to Hawthorne Manor. Jonathan Hayes sat in silence, his gaze distant as he took in the familiar yet strangely foreign surroundings. 5 years had passed, and now he was returning to the place he once called home, the place that held his most cherished memories, but also his deepest sorrow. When the car came to a stop, Jonathan hesitated. A heavy weight pressed against his chest, as if every breath carried the echo of Catherine, the woman he had loved beyond measure. Everything should have remained exactly as he left it, silent, untouched, frozen in time. But from the moment the iron gates creaked open, he sensed something different. A gentle breeze swept past, carrying with it a scent he didn't recognize. Light, fresh yet strangely out of place in a space he had sealed in mourning. Something had changed, and he wasn't sure he was ready to face it. The driver stepped out first, opening the car door, but Jonathan Hayes remained motionless. His eyes scanned the facade of Hawthorne Manor, once a symbol of love and happiness, now a ghost of the past. The grand windows still stood tall, yet they felt hollow. The marble walls still gleamed, yet they no longer radiated warmth. With a heavy breath, he finally stepped out of the car. Beneath his feet, the gravel path crunched dryly, reminding him that this was no longer a home. It was a monument to faded memories. The front door swung open before he could reach for the handle. Mrs. Eleanor, the loyal housekeeper, stood there, her gentle smile tempered by a hint of hesitation. "Welcome home, Mr. Jonathan." Her voice was soft, laced with genuine warmth. Jonathan gave a slight nod. "Is everything as I left it?" Mrs. Eleanor hesitated, her eyes flickering with something unspoken. "Yes, sir. Everything is as you left it, though there have been a few small changes." Jonathan frowned. "Changes?" She pressed her lips together as if carefully choosing her words. "You'll see soon enough." He didn't press further. Stepping into the grand hall, he immediately felt it. Something was off. The afternoon light streamed across the wooden floors, soft but unfamiliar. The heavy gray drapes he had chosen to keep the sunlight out had been replaced with airy cream-colored fabric, allowing brightness to seep into every corner. The air no longer felt stale and suffocating, but carried a faint, lingering scent. Floral, fresh, foreign. A strange unease crept over him. He had expected to walk into a mausoleum of the past, but instead he had entered a space that was subtly, almost imperceptibly, shifting. Jonathan tightened his fists, reminding himself that this was still Hawthorne Manor, still his home. But for some reason, he wasn't entirely sure if that was true anymore. Jonathan strode through the grand hallways of Hawthorne Manor, each step echoing in the vast, quiet space. Everything looked the same: the cold marble walls, the intricate chandeliers, the wooden staircase he had walked 1,000 times. Yet, the feeling of unfamiliarity clung to him. As he prepared to go upstairs, something caught his attention. A faint scent drifted through the air. Not the aged wood or the musty scent of old books, but something fresh, floral, almost wild. He stopped, his gaze drawn to the large window overlooking the garden. There, a young woman knelt among the rose bushes. Her hands moved gently over the petals, pruning the wilted leaves with the precision of someone who knew exactly what they were doing. Her long brown hair was tied back in a loose braid, glinting in the late afternoon sun. Jonathan's frown deepened. That garden belonged to Catherine. No one except her had ever touched those roses. Irritation flared within him. He pushed open the door and descended the stone steps with purpose. "What are you doing here?" His voice was sharp, cutting through the quiet. The woman startled slightly but looked up at him, her gray eyes wide with surprise. She didn't stammer or fumble for an apology. Instead, she rose to her feet, brushing a smudge of soil from her hand, and met his gaze with calm composure. "I'm tending to the garden," she replied evenly. "By what right?" Jonathan pressed. "Who gave you permission to touch these flowers?" She blinked, as if piecing together the situation. "Mr. Richard, your lawyer hired me." Jonathan stiffened. Richard? How dare he make such a decision without consulting him? Noticing his displeasure, the woman continued. her tone measured. "I only meant to keep the garden from falling into ruin. When I arrived, the plants were already wilting from neglect." His jaw tightened. The flowers Catherine had cherished, now in the hands of a stranger? The woman seemed to sense the turmoil in him, yet she stood firm. "My name is Charlotte Evans. I'm a gardener, and my job is to keep this place alive." Jonathan held her gaze, emotions churning within him. A stranger, stepping into the world he had tried so hard to keep untouched. And he had no idea how he felt about it. Jonathan returned to the house, his mind heavy with unease. He couldn't shake the image of that woman, Charlotte Evans, the stranger who had stepped so effortlessly into sacred ground. Standing in his study, his eyes drifted, almost unconsciously, toward the window. Below, Charlotte was still at work. She didn't rush. She didn't falter under the weight of his anger. Instead, she meticulously pruned each leaf, cradling the flowers as if they were something fragile and alive. The feeling inside Jonathan was strange, a mixture of resentment, confusion, and something else he wasn't ready to name. Mrs. Eleanor entered the room, placing a cup of tea on his desk. "You seem troubled," she observed, her wise gaze following his line of sight. Jonathan took a slow breath, crossing his arms. "I don't understand why Richard brought her here." Mrs. Eleanor gave a knowing smile, as if she had expected this reaction. "Perhaps the garden isn't the only thing that needed tending." Jonathan turned to her, his frown deepening. "What are you saying?" But Mrs. Eleanor only smiled and left before he could press further. Jonathan turned back to the window. He should have felt angry that a stranger had touched what once belonged to Catherine. And yet, there was something else stirring inside him, a feeling he hadn't allowed himself to experience in years. As Charlotte knelt down, her hands brushing over the petals with quiet reverence, a memory of Catherine surfaced in his mind. Not because they were the same, but because both of them had a way of breathing life into this place in their own way. And for the first time in a long while, Jonathan wasn't sure if he could keep everything frozen in time any longer. The sky darkened, heavy with the promise of rain. The wind picked up, sending tree branches swaying wildly, but Charlotte remained in the garden, carefully tending to the fragile blooms. From the balcony above, Jonathan watched her, conflicted. He shouldn't care. He shouldn't be standing there wondering whether she'd seek shelter or let herself get drenched. But when the first raindrops began to fall, he saw Charlotte kneel down, shielding the delicate roses from the forceful wind. A strange frustration flared within him. Why was she so stubborn? Before he could think twice, Jonathan strode down the steps. "What are you doing? Get inside, now!" His voice cut through the sound of the falling rain. Charlotte turned, her dark hair already soaked, but her eyes held no fear. "These roses can't withstand strong winds. If I don't secure them, they'll break." Jonathan clenched his jaw, frustration and something else, something unfamiliar, coiling inside him. Why did she care so much? Why did it bother him that she did? The storm raged around them, but in that moment, the only thing Jonathan could focus on was Charlotte, her determination, her unwavering care. Without another word, he stepped forward, shielding the trembling stems alongside her. Charlotte looked momentarily surprised but said nothing. They worked in silence. The only sounds were the relentless downpour and the howling wind. Before long, the rain fell harder, soaking through Jonathan's shirt, the fabric clinging to his skin, but he didn't care. When the last of the roses had been secured, he looked up, only to find Charlotte watching him intently. They were both breathless, rainwater dripping from their faces. Charlotte gave a small laugh. "I didn't think you'd come down here." Jonathan wasn't sure what to say. He didn't know if he did this for the garden or for her. "Let's go inside." His voice was quieter now, lacking its earlier sharpness. Charlotte nodded. The rain had stopped, but something else had just begun. Jonathan had never liked the rain. It had always been a cruel reminder of his loneliness. Endless, silent nights where only the sound of raindrops against the window filled the void in his heart. But tonight, standing by the fireplace in the library, wrapped in its warmth, he felt something stir, a sense of comfort he hadn't known in years. His shirt was still damp, but the warmth of the flames helped chase away the chill. Across the room, Charlotte was drying her hair, her thin jacket draped over the chair. Neither of them spoke, yet the silence between them no longer felt distant. Mrs. Eleanor entered, carrying 2 cups of tea. "The two of you are just as stubborn as each other." She shook her head, though there was amusement in her eyes. Charlotte let out a small laugh. "I was just doing my job." Jonathan folded his arms, his gaze lingering on her longer than he intended. "I didn't think you cared that much." Charlotte raised an eyebrow. "And I didn't think you did either." Jonathan had no immediate answer. He wasn't sure when it had happened, when watching her in the garden had become part of his routine. He didn't know when his initial anger had begun to soften, replaced by something else. A quiet curiosity, a strange sense of ease, a life he had thought he had lost. He took the cup of tea, his gaze still on Charlotte. Perhaps Mrs. Eleanor was right. Not only did the garden need tending, but so did he. The next morning, Jonathan woke earlier than usual. For the first time in years, he made the decision to step into the garden he had avoided for so long. When he arrived, Charlotte was already there. She turned at the sound of his footsteps, her eyes widening slightly in surprise before filling with quiet amusement. "Come to inspect my work?" she teased. Jonathan crossed his arms, tilting his head slightly. "Not exactly, I just wanted to see what you've changed." Charlotte smiled. "Then you came at the perfect time." She extended a hand, inviting him to walk with her. And for the first time in 5 years, Jonathan walked through the garden, not in search of Catherine's memory, but to see something new. The sky was clearer than usual, the golden sunlight casting a warm glow over the once neglected garden, now blooming with life. Jonathan walked slowly along the gravel path, taking in every change that Charlotte had brought to this place. The rose beds were more vibrant than ever, each petal catching the morning light, a symbol of renewal. He stopped before a cluster of deep red roses, Catherine's favorite. But this time, the feeling inside him was no longer grief, but gratitude. Charlotte appeared beside him, her hair dancing slightly in the soft breeze. "Are you happy with what I've done?" she asked, her voice holding a quiet anticipation. Jonathan was silent for a moment before he spoke. "I think Catherine would have liked this." His voice was steady, lighter than it had been in years. "Thank you, Charlotte." She looked at him, a soft smile spreading across her face. "You're welcome, Jonathan." He turned to her, and for the first time, his name on her lips didn't feel unfamiliar. Between them, no more words were needed. The roses around them bloomed as if they, too, were bearing witness to a new beginning, not just for the garden, but for both of them. And somewhere, perhaps, Catherine was smiling too. A year had passed since Jonathan stepped out of the shadows of his past. Hawthorne Manor was no longer a place of sorrow, but one filled with life and color. Charlotte and Jonathan remained by each other's side, tending to the garden they had brought back to life. But now it was no longer just roses. Beside the old garden, a brilliant field of tulips stretched across the land, painting it with vibrant hues. Charlotte had spent the entire spring planting them, and now, in full bloom, they stood as a testament to new beginnings. That night, under the soft glow of the moon, Jonathan and Charlotte walked through the garden, basking in the serenity of the moment. Charlotte took a deep breath, her eyes shining. "The tulips are beautiful." Jonathan stopped, his heart pounding. The golden glow of the tulips surrounded them, swaying gently in the evening breeze. He reached for Charlotte's hand, his fingers tracing small, reassuring circles against her skin. "They're breathtaking," he murmured, his voice soft, almost reverent. "But nothing in this world could ever compare to you." She turned to him, surprised to see Jonathan kneeling, a simple yet elegant ring in his hand. "Charlotte Evans, you brought light back into my life. You taught me how to love again. Will you walk this journey with me?" Charlotte froze for a moment before smiling radiantly, happy tears glistening in her eyes. "Yes, Jonathan, 1,000 times yes." He stood, pulling her into his arms. As they shared their first kiss as an engaged couple, the tulips around them seemed to bloom even brighter in celebration. 3 years later, Hawthorne Manor was no longer just a quiet estate. It had become a home filled with love and laughter. Jonathan and Charlotte had been married for over 2 years now, and they were no longer just a couple. Their two little angels, Eleanor and Theo, had added a new layer of joy to their lives. In the soft morning light, Charlotte stepped into the garden, holding the tiny hand of their 3-year-old daughter, Eleanor, who had already developed a love for flowers. Nearby, Jonathan was teaching their 1.5-year-old son, Theo, how to press his tiny fingers into the soil, feeling its warmth. "Daddy, what's this flower called?" Eleanor asked, her bright eyes fixed on a patch of newly bloomed daisies. Jonathan knelt beside her, smiling. "These are chamomile flowers, sweetheart. Your mother planted them last spring." Eleanor nodded thoughtfully before running over to help Charlotte water the tulips just beginning to sprout. Charlotte glanced at her husband and son, her heart swelling with happiness. The once rose-dominated garden had transformed into a vibrant landscape, featuring soft lavender, brilliant tulips, lush hydrangeas, and even a small section dedicated to golden sunflowers. Jonathan knelt beside Theo, brushing the dirt from his tiny hands. "How about we plant something new today?" he suggested, his voice gentle. Theo looked up, his round eyes full of curiosity. "New flower?" he asked in his baby voice. Jonathan chuckled, nodding. "Yes, something very special." Beside them, Eleanor clapped her hands excitedly. "Can I help too?" "What kind of flower?" Charlotte asked, her eyes sparkling with curiosity, just like their daughters. Jonathan stepped closer, pulling Charlotte into a gentle embrace. "I think it's time we plant cherry blossoms. They'll remind us of the beautiful springs we've had and the ones still ahead." Charlotte laughed softly. "Then let's get started." Eleanor squealed with excitement, running off to grab the small gardening tools. Together, the family knelt down, carefully placing the first seeds into the soil. That afternoon, as the golden hues of sunset bathed the garden, Charlotte leaned against Jonathan, watching their children play among the flowers. "Did you ever imagine we'd have moments like this?" Charlotte whispered. Jonathan shook his head, squeezing her hand gently. "No, but you gave me all of this." He pressed a soft kiss to her hair, his gaze full of love. Once again, surrounded by blooming flowers, Jonathan realized he had truly found peace.